It's the Chronicles of a Gooner, and we are live. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.
Hello and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Welcome to our Euro 2020 show. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou. And on this edition, we're going to be discussing England's historic win over Germany. We're going to be discussing the rest of the action from the round of 16. And we're going to be trying to make sense of the question, is it actually coming home? The country was sent into pandemonium yesterday after goals from Raheem Sterling and Harry Kane put the Germans to the sword, ending 55 years of hurt against the old enemy. But are England capable of getting over the line and winning this thing? It certainly looks as though the draw has fallen in their favour. There's no doubt about that. They'll meet the Ukraine in Rome in a few days' time. And then they'll face the winner of Denmark or the Czech Republic in a semi-final at Wembley, should they progress. So it is looking good for Gareth Southgate's side on paper. But be aware, that's what it looked like in the last World Cup, and England still somehow managed to fall apart. So let's be a little bit cautious. Let's be a little bit careful, and you know, let's see what happens. But let's kick off by kind of reflecting on that game against Germany. And I got to admit, going into the game, I didn't give England all that much hope, and not because I don't think that England have good players, because I didn't trust maybe Gareth Southgate. I didn't trust some of the players that he was going to select. I didn't trust the players to mentally stay switched on for the entire 90 minutes. You know, there were a number of factors that, in my mind, made Germany the favourites going into yesterday. And I know that's contrary to what a lot of other people thought. I know a lot of people looked at it and went, well, this Germany side are not quite as formidable, not quite as scary as they once were. But when the two teams were announced, I actually thought that kind of strengthened Germany's case. And I've got to admit, you know, Gareth Southgate, he gets a lot of stick. I'm someone who's criticised him before. I've never criticised Gareth Southgate as a person, because as a person, I think he's brilliant. I think he's a breath of fresh air. I think he's what you need at international level. Someone who may at times divide opinion with some of his selection decisions, but as a man, as a person, unites people. And that's what Gareth Southgate does. I don't think even his biggest critics will look at Gareth Southgate and go, I don't like this guy. You know, I can't support him. I can't get behind him. I think that Gareth Southgate is that type of character who's honest, who wears his heart on his sleeve, who's incredibly articulate in the way he puts things across in the press. And even if you don't agree with someone all the time, I think you can get on board and you can believe in it and you can you can accept it if you kind of like the person and you appreciate where what they're saying is coming from. And to kick off with the way England set up, of course, Jordan Pickford was in goal. It was a back three of Walker, Stones and Maguire. Trippier and Shaw were playing in the wing-back positions. And there was a lot of debate in the lead-up to this game as to whether England should or should not try to match up Germany's system. And I'd said in the lead-up to the game that I thought that was absolutely the right way to go. And it proved to be the right way to go. Germany, you know, when they faced Hungary in the group stages and Hungary matched them up in that way, Germany struggled. The game ended in a 2-2 draw. When they played against the Portuguese, who didn't match them up and were very narrow in the way they set up, Germany just pulled them apart. They literally tore them to pieces and had so much joy in the wide areas. We're getting balls into the likes of Kai Havertz and Thomas Muller, and sort of arriving into the penalty area. A couple of own goals helped them in that particular game as well. But Germany were creating overloads in the wide spaces, and nobody in that Portuguese side or you know, was able to cope with that. So I think England done the right thing. I think with Gareth Southgate, people question his tactics, people question his selections. I think it's very easy to get carried away with a selection and a formation before a game. I think that I've said it before. I've said it throughout the course of the season when discussing Arsenal. People have looked at some of Mikel Arteta's teams and gone, my God, why has he done that? Why has he picked this player? And I always say this, look, you can have your opinion at the sort of beginning of a game, but I think that opinion should be with a massive caveat that says, but my opinion is irrelevant if they get the job done and if that selection works. And this is the point, right? You know, we're not managers. If we were managers, we'd be sitting where Gareth Southgate's sitting and he'd be sitting here doing what we're doing. So you've got to have an element of trust in your manager. You've got to give him the benefit of the doubt until things go wrong. And in Gareth Southgate's defense, up until now, yes, you could say England probably should have scored a few more goals at the tournament. Remember, they'd only scored twice going into this round of 16 tie in the competition. I think you've got to say that, yeah, in an ideal world, you'd have liked to see them hit the back of the net more frequently. But England, having not conceded a goal yet, you know, have done really well. And how can you criticize Gareth Southgate for that? He's decided to take a bit more of a pragmatic approach than probably any England fan would have. But, you know, it's a sensible approach, and it's an approach that's seen them reap the rewards so far. Moving into midfield, he went with Phillips and Rice again. Not what I would have gone for, admittedly. I'm not the biggest fan of those two as a pair. I think they can both be very useful players as individuals, but I just think the pair stops you progressing the ball a great deal. And I think what he's done again here, Gareth Southgate, is he's accepted that the likes of Kroos and Goretzka are probably at a higher level technically, and he's gone to stifle them. And that has, again, impacted England a little bit in terms of what they can do as an attacking outlet. But again, on the balance of things, it was probably the right decision. Moving further forward, Harry Kane continued up front as expected. Bukayo Saka got the nod again. I thought Bukayo Saka, you know, he was getting a lot of praise at halftime. I thought he did okay. Even as an Arsenal fan, you know, I can be honest. I thought he did okay. I thought there were moments where he looked like, or he kind of threatened to burst into life without actually doing a great deal. But, you know, done a sterling enough job. And that brings me nicely onto Sterling. I didn't mean that, honestly, it just came out of the blue. Raheem Sterling, who has received so much criticism, so much stick at the back end of the Premier League season and going into this tournament. Yet Raheem Sterling has scored 3 of England's 4 goals in this competition. As Rio Ferdinand said, and I don't often like quoting Rio Ferdinand, but put some respect on the name Raheem Sterling, because he has been the difference maker for England at these finals. There is no getting away from that. And people were kind of beating the drum about Foden and beating the drum about Sancho, etc., etc. But Raheem Sterling, who is more experienced than all of those guys, who has performed at this level for a longer period of time, he's showing his worth, he's showing his experience. And I've seen sort of people questioning him on social media, saying he doesn't pass the ball enough and he's been a bit greedy and he's done this and he's done that. Yeah, look, he's not been perfect. Let's have it right. But Raheem Sterling has been, as I say, the difference maker for England. And there is no denying that. He deserves an immense amount of praise to keep delivering under incredible pressure, under incredible scrutiny. What I found absolutely amazing this morning was that I scrolled through some of the back pages of a load of the sort of tabloids here in the UK this morning. And what I find amazing is that, you know, look, for me, Raheem Sterling has been England's star at this tournament, right? As I say, 3 of the 4 goals. He's come up with the goals in really key and vital moments. His goal was the difference maker yesterday. I know Harry Kane's put the kind of icing on the cake and, you know, finished the game off essentially. But it was his goal that sparked the win. It was his goal that sparked the wild celebrations in Wembley after a really sort of cagey 70, 75 minutes. And pretty much all of the back pages of the English tabloids today, bar one, have a picture of Harry Kane on the back of it, who, again, was completely anonymous until he had a ball put on a plate for him by Jack Grealish, who, by the way, was incredible when he came on. Jack Grealish does the simple things, but the simple things can be the most effective things. And, you know, just stepping in field the way he did to create that space on the outside for sure to get in, and then being able to pick him out without looking, without sort of taking an extra touch and slowing the whole thing down, just knowing where Luke Shaw was going to be was what opened that space for the Raheem Sterling goal. And then when Jack Grealish was in the position himself to deliver into the box on his weaker left foot, he picked out a wonderful pass for Harry Kane, who, as I say, had it put on a plate and just had to nod it home. So, Raheem Sterling, Jack Grealish, the big players for me yesterday, and the players that deserve the most praise. Also, Jordan Pickford, he's another player who's received lots and lots of criticism in years gone by. And I've spoken to many England fans over the course of last season and in the build-up to the competition who were absolutely insistent that Jordan Pickford should not be the number one. He made a really good save from Timo Werner in the first half, made a really good save from Kai Havertz in the second half. I just think he's been really, really solid and really, he hasn't had to do an awful lot, but when he's had to do it, he's done it well. He's done it brilliantly. And for someone who is often criticised for a lack of concentration, I think he's kind of proven that wrong, which is great. I also want to give a bit of an honourable mention to Kyle Walker. And look, Kyle Walker's got his limitations, right? We know he can give the ball away cheaply. We know he can get caught out at times. But what an athlete that guy is. I mean, Germany's biggest opportunity and the one that they really should have scored and really sort of punished England for was the one that came late on when Thomas Muller was slipped through on goal. Now, if I were German and I could have picked any player for that chance to fall to, any player who I would bank on to be ice cold, ruthless and cool in front of goal in a moment like that, I'd have picked Thomas Muller. But what happens is when the ball gets played through to Thomas Muller, first of all, I think, Thomas Muller's got to do better. Let's not get away from that. But we've got to recognize and acknowledge the part I think that Kyle Walker plays in Thomas Muller's scuppering that chance, because Kyle Walker at full pelt, at full acceleration is a scary prospect. And I think the minute Muller realizes that Kyle Walker is coming, that he's coming up on the outside of him, that he is closing the ground on him, he panics. He goes into a state of panic. And I think in an ideal world, Muller wants to take that chance a lot later than he actually does. Muller doesn't have the pace to get away from Kyle Walker, probably doesn't have the pace to be able to take an extra touch without the fear of Kyle Walker getting back and getting something on the ball. So, yeah, for me, I'm not saying that Muller is excused, because that's a glorious opportunity. And I think everybody had their heart in their mouth at that point. But I think Kyle Walker plays some part in forcing Muller into rushing that. And essentially that's partly why he misses. I think, that was probably England's stroke of fortune. I think to win a tournament like this, you do need a stroke of luck. You do need a stroke of fortune. But in reality, Germany, weren't really good enough to win the game, to deserve to win the game. Anyway, I thought a couple of Joachim Löw's decisions were strange. I don't understand why Serge Gnabry is not in the side. He had one poor game in the group stage. Other than that, I think he's been pretty good. I think he's proven that he's more potent in front of goal throughout the course of the last couple of seasons, or the last season for sure, than Timo Werner. I think maybe he was looking at Timo Werner's movement as something that could be key, that could be the difference maker. And I get it to a degree, but I think that probably, somebody like Serge Gnabry should have been on a little bit earlier. I thought that, as I say, I thought that England were wise to respect the Germans and play in a way that was primarily geared to stifling them and then being able to take their moments when they came along. It wasn't a naive England. And over the years, we've said that phrase way too much, naive England. So full credit to England, full credit to Gareth Southgate, and full credit to the players that executed the plan almost flawlessly, because they did. Now, there were a couple of moments for the Germans, but against a team of that quality, you're always going to get that. And on this occasion, the luck went their way. And you're looking at them now, England, to take on Ukraine in Rome. And, the path to the final, it's not clear. It's not cut and dry, because we've seen at these championships, anything can happen. I mean, who would have backed Germany, Portugal, and France to all go out in the round of 16? 3 of the group of death, the teams that progressed from the group of death, are all out. And who saw that coming? Very few. Who saw, after the group stages, the Dutch crashing out to the Czechs? Not very many. Who saw the French crashing out to Switzerland? Not very many. So this tournament has taught us that, that a lot can happen. And before we kind of quickly round up on a few of the other games as well in this round, I just want to say, how much did we need a tournament like this? After a year that's been really difficult, for so many reasons, watching football in empty stadiums without passion, where at times it's been a little bit boring, a little bit dry, a little bit stale, to now be sitting here and watching this tournament where there's fans, there's atmosphere, there's buzz, there's quality football on show, there are goals galore. I just think it's been a real breath of fresh air, and it's been so needed. I mean, on Thursday, on Monday night. So, and I'll talk about this a little bit more detail on the Arsenal pod that we do later on today, because we were due to do one yesterday and I had to cancel it because myself and my guest were both ill. And I know you guys have heard that from me a lot lately, but literally my health has been terrible lately. But Monday night, I finished work at 5 p.m. I planned to do a Euros podcast late on Monday night. And I was literally so unwell. I don't want to go into it because you won't want to know, but I was being sick of the works, basically. And I was so desperately trying to stay up and watch the football. And I'm so glad I soldiered for it. I paid for it yesterday, but I did not want to miss any of the action on Monday because it was that bloody good. The Croatia game. I mean, what an encounter that was. Spain at their brilliant best at times, playing wonderful football, keeping the ball, some excellent goals, but also showing their vulnerabilities, at the heart of their defense, and Croatia showing incredible character, determination to get themselves back into the game. And then it went to extra time. And, you talk about narratives, you talk about a story being written, and Alvaro Morata being the one to find that fourth goal for Spain in extra time, the one that ultimately defeated Croatia, was for me brilliant. What a take and finish. And you kind of delighted for him after you've seen all the abuse that he's taken over the last sort of couple of weeks. And, he's come out and publicly spoken about it, which is, I think, shone a light on it and made people kind of realize that there's just no place for it. But what a game that was. 5-3 to Spain after extra time. You talk about that France-Switzerland game. Wow. What a match. And I think, the Swiss took the lead through Seferovic, and I think everybody, was shocked, was surprised, was taken aback by that, but probably felt that overall, in the end anyway, France would have the quality to drag themselves over the line and be able to, to get the result that they needed. And France, in the spell of 2 minutes were just unreal. Switzerland missed that penalty, obviously, Rodriguez on 55 minutes, and 2 minutes later, Karim Benzema went down the other end, scored a wonderful goal off the back of a brilliant touch to kind of bring the ball into his stride. It was expertly finished, and then he popped up at the far post to turn in a rebound from Antoine Griezmann's effort. And you thought, wow, this is done and dusted. And then Paul Pogba, who's actually received so much stick off the back of this game. He's even been blamed by some, actually, for France's exit, which I think is absolutely ludicrous when you consider. I thought he had a really good game. I thought his goal was one of the goals of the tournament. He's certainly in the top three so far. As a sensational finish. And people are kind of criticizing Paul Pogba. Maybe he's not defensively sound enough. Maybe he's not solid enough. I think a lot of people do that. They look at players and they pick out their faults and their shortcomings and don't often acknowledge that actually that shortcoming or that particular fault or that particular area of development, if you like, in that player's game has always been there. And therefore, it's down to the manager to ensure that with his selection, with his system, with his formation, that is not exposed. And playing Paul Pogba as one of a two in midfield probably does expose that a little bit. I thought when he played, when France started the game with a back three, if you've got a back three, then you can play with that two in midfield, with one of them being a little bit less disciplined because you've got that extra man behind you. But the minute that France switched to a back four, then it became difficult, didn't it, for Paul Pogba to be able to influence and impact the game as he'd like in the attacking third, but also be able to kind of, cover those defensive spaces. And I think, you saw it from Switzerland. They never gave up. I thought they were brilliant. They were solid for the most part, barring a few minute spell. But what was most impressive about the Swiss, and it's something that I'd actually criticised them for going into the tournament, was I didn't think they were clinical enough in the key moments going into the competition. Seferovic popped up with another goal, another brilliant header on the 81st minute. And then Mario Gavranovic on 90 minutes, having been put in a wonderful ball from Granit Xhaka, took a really good touch to make the space for himself, finished expertly, and sent the place into wild scenes. And then, of course, the Swiss held on throughout extra time and held their nerve in the penalty shootout, with Kylian Mbappe, of all people, missing the decisive penalty. Wonderful, wonderful game. And as I say, Monday was probably the best day of football I've watched in a long, long time. I know we're jumping a little bit back and forward in terms of the chronological order here, but we go back to Saturday's games just briefly. Wales completely out of their depth, in my opinion. The Danes were on another level. Damsgaard, excellent. Dolberg up top, excellent. Mæhle for Denmark, excellent. And the Welsh just didn't really turn up. I know there's been a lot made of the fact that they've had to travel so much and all of that. In the aftermath of this one, and I get it. I understand the frustration. I think that the tournament format is not ideal. I think what the tournament format has done, though, and the positive of it, is that had we staged it in a country where there was stricter COVID restrictions only, we'd have missed out on some of the cracking atmospheres that we've seen. So the atmosphere in Copenhagen, the atmosphere in Budapest, the atmosphere at Wembley yesterday. If you had played all of that in Seville, for example, or at Hampden Park, for example, you wouldn't have got this same buzz around the tournament. So I do think that it's not fair on all the teams, and I think that some of the big boys have really benefited from being able to start their campaigns at home. And in England's case, they travel to Rome for the quarterfinal, but if they do progress, they've got the semi-final and the final to come at Wembley. So, yeah, I don't think it's completely fair from a sporting perspective, but I do think had we not seen this, had we not had this multi-city event, then we probably would have seen a lot more flat atmospheres. And I actually think the atmospheres at some of the games have been what's really kind of helped us enjoy and warm to this tournament after what's been a really difficult 12 months. Italy, of course, got over the line against Austria. Weren't at their brilliant best, Italy, in my opinion. They struggled in this one, but Roberto Mancini just showing that, he has got the squad. He has got players to call upon. And when Chiesa and Pessina came on, both had an impact in extra time and saw Italy get over the line. And I got to admit, when Kaladzic pulled one back for a few minutes, you wondered if Austria were going to pull off the impossible. But listen, Italy were criticised quite heavily. And I think what had happened with the way Italy performed in the group stages was the level of expectation rose so much that unless they completely blew Austria away, they were going to be criticised. But what I would say is, I think that Austria were very, very good, very, very solid, very underrated going into the game. And so you've got to take that into consideration as well. I think Italy will know that they can play better than that. Italy have played better than that in this tournament so far. But what they also did here was show that they have got that grit and determination and the ability to get over the line when even things don't look, or when things are not ideal, when things are not clicking as they'd like, when things are not necessarily all falling into place. Even then, Italy have the ability to remain solid at the back, to not give their opponents too much in terms of good opportunities. And then, as I say, we talk about the depth of that squad. We talk about players that I always say don't get the credit they deserve because they don't play in the Premier League, because people don't really maybe necessarily know enough about them. but the likes of Federico Chiesa, who's not even getting into this starting lineup, by the way, but has shown not just for Italy, not just on Saturday night, but throughout the course of the season for Juventus as well, that you can rely on him at big moments to step up and produce. And so, looking at him, looking at Pessina as well, two players who, as I say, came off the bench and made an impact, that will give Italy encouragement moving forward. If we move back on, we covered the games on Monday. Let's quickly touch on Netherlands against the Czech Republic. And I think this one was, it was a cagey affair, probably tipped by the fact that Matthijs de Ligt got sent off. I think it was absolutely the right decision. I don't think anybody can have any real complaints about that. And I think that was just kind of the spark that the Czechs needed. Listen, I saw the Czechs play live at Wembley against England. I've actually been impressed with the Czech Republic at this tournament overall. I really have. They've been a lot better than I expected. Maybe don't have the star names on paper that some of the other nations do. You don't look at that side and say, that's the player I fear. Patrick Schick is obviously the standout player in that group, given what he's done at the tournament so far. But I guess what the point I'm trying to make here is when I saw them against England at Wembley, they looked like a team to me that weren't all that bothered if they got the points or not, that had already secured qualification and were quite happy to just sort of take their foot off the gas, made a lot of changes throughout the game against England. I don't think they're as bad a side as people make them out. And I think that while it was a shock that they beat the Dutch, given how sort of free-flowing the Dutch have looked in the competition or had looked in the competition up until that point, I don't think it was a massive shock that the Czech Republic beat them. Goals from Holeš, goals from Patrick Schick, ending the Netherlands' hopes of progression. I'm not saying the Czech Republic are going to win the competition. I'm not saying they're great. All I'm saying is I think a lot of England fans probably looked at them during that game at Wembley and said, these lot are not very special. England didn't really do a great deal against them, though, did they? 1-0 win, goal in the first half. The game really petered out after that because, as I say, it was two sides, in my opinion, that knew they were through, were happy to progress, and that was that. And I think you saw the Czech Republic able to kind of step up their level off the back of taking their foot off the gas in that game against England last Tuesday. So, yeah, not saying that they, before the England fans jump on me, I'm not saying that, Czech Republic could have beaten England if they wanted to, etc. There's none of that. All I'm saying is that I think there's been a bit of I think how good the Czech Republic are or can be has been a little bit of what's the word? There's been a bit of an oversight on many people's parts. The other game that I want to talk about was Belgium against Portugal. Portugal just really lacking in ideas. Torgan Hazard with a brilliant goal, literally hammered it home. And from then on, it was a case of one-way traffic with the Belgians always looking to hit Portugal in the counter-attack. I think that, there's been a lot of talk about Portugal in the lead up to the tournament and how much quality they have in the squad. I think that they haven't quite gelled as people would have hoped and would have liked. I think the Belgians were incredibly professional in the way they went about their business, which is probably something that you would have said is a little bit of a surprise. I've never really held Roberto Martinez in mind as someone who is tactically astute, who is capable of getting teams over the line. I've always seen Roberto Martinez as someone who plays idealistic football, enjoyable football, but isn't necessarily on par with some of the world's top managers when it comes to being able to shut opponents out. And I think it was a bit of both. I think it was a bit of Martinez kind of improving in that sense and getting it right, but also a bit of Martinez, a bit of Portugal not being as cohesive as you'd like. Does the fact that Martinez probably has, when you look at that Belgian side, the worst part of it, I would say, is that back three. Do you rate that back three? Thomas Vermaelen, Toby Alderweireld, both in the twilight of their careers. Thomas Vermaelen, as Arsenal fans, a player we know very well. Would you say he's at top level anymore? No. So I think maybe the fact that he hasn't got, a prime Vincent Company anymore, and, and a prime Toby Alderweireld, and a prime Jan Vertonghen, and a prime Thomas van Ireland, probably has made Roberto Martinez become a touch more conservative, and that's actually made Belgium a more difficult team to beat as a result of that. So it's one of those where I don't know if it's his philosophy adapting, changing, being tweaked, or if it's because he's kind of been forced into it by the fact that he doesn't have full confidence in those players that he's asking to marshal his backline. So it could be a bit of both. But Belgium through, and obviously meet Italy in the next round. That's going to be an absolute cracker. Let's pick up. I had this on my notes to discuss, and I got to discuss this. DDL, hope you're good, man. He says, can we get your views on how and why Granit Xhaka has turned into prime Andrea Pirlo? How good was Granit Xhaka for Switzerland against France? How good was he? He was absolutely fucking sensational. He was brilliant in terms of covering defensive spaces. He was, constantly recycling the ball for the Swiss, constantly moving the ball forward. So many Arsenal fans have said, oh, he just plays the ball sideways. He plays the ball backwards. He doesn't progress the ball. He progressed the ball incredibly well, picked out a number of excellent passes to slice open the French defense. None more so than for Switzerland's decisive equalizer, late on from Gavranovic. I think that you look at Granit Xhaka and, as an Arsenal fan who's actually defended him against a lot of the stick and criticism that he's received, what is undeniable is that if Granit Xhaka is allowed to play his game and play his game in a system that complements him, he can be an incredibly effective player. I've been banging on all season about what a leader he is, and people have criticized me for that and have criticized him. You only need to look at the pictures of that Swiss huddle. The captain leading them in the circle, talking more than the manager, giving more instruction than the manager. Granit Xhaka is a leader, whether you like him or not, whether you think he's got shortcomings, which he does have. There's no, every player does. We've just talked about Paul Pogba scoring an absolute screamer in the top corner and then getting defensively caught out. So the point here is that Granit Xhaka is a useful footballer. Granit Xhaka is a player who I think has been highly unappreciated and undervalued at Arsenal. And there was a tweet. I actually screenshotted it on my phone to read it out to you guys, because I thought, this just sums up Arsenal and how bad we've been in doing business over years and years and years now. Where is it? Hold on a second. Let me just pick it out. Where was it? I found it yesterday. I can't find it now, but it was something along the lines of only Arsenal would sell a midfielder who has shone at the tournament, is in the prime of his career, for a cut price fee to Roma. And there's also rumours that Juventus are now interested in Granit Xhaka. And does his performance, does Switzerland's progression perhaps aid Arsenal in potentially demanding a little bit more money for Granit Xhaka moving forward? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see, and we'll talk about that a little bit more on our podcast later on today. We'll be focusing on the latest Arsenal transfer news. But Granit Xhaka deserves a mention because, as I say, I thought he was brilliant. I think, everybody watching that game was in awe of how good he'd performed. And I'm not saying he performs like that every single week, because he doesn't, but he is capable of that. And considering that some Arsenal fans would have you believe he's the worst midfielder ever to wear the shirt, I think you've got to say that he's received unfair stick and unfair criticism throughout his Arsenal career. Does he have limitations? Absolutely does. But he can also be a very useful player. Many players have limitations. And as I said, when I was talking about Paul Pogba, if you're going to hang your hat on one of these players, a player who isn't necessarily the complete all-rounder, who does have a glaring shortcoming, a shortcoming that is visible to everybody, then you as a manager, if you're going to, as I say, hang your hat on that player, if you're going to back that player, if you're going to support that player, if you're going to select that player, have to find a way to be able to cater for that, accommodate for that. And that's the way it is. Let's go over to the comments and see what you guys are saying. Chuck some questions in for the last few minutes as well. Don't forget to join us as well on the, if you're watching us live right now on YouTube, don't forget to join us on the 90 Min Euro show as well. And we'll be going live at 11 a.m. As soon as I finish this, I'm going to be heading down to the studio. So get involved. We're going to be deep diving into that England-Germany game, I'm sure, and talking about what's been a highly entertaining round of 16. Let's quickly see where we're at in terms of likes. I don't think we're anywhere near where we should be, considering I can see across the multiple platforms, even at this early time in the morning, there's over 100 of you watching us, which is fantastic. Please hit the like button. It really, really does help. And subscribe to the channel if you're new. We're closing in on 14,000, and I'd love to get there as soon as possible. Jack the Ripper says, let me sleep, Harry. You're too early. Yeah, as I say, it's a really busy time trying to cover all the Arsenal stuff, cover all the Euro stuff. Took a day off yesterday as well, which I'm going to pay for today. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, so I wanted to get this one in nice and early, and we'll be bringing you more content later on. So don't worry. If you're half asleep through this one, you can watch it on replay. You can download it via all the major podcast stores, and then you can join us later. You're a little bit more awake. Cypriot Gooner says, France made Granit Xhaka look good. He had so much time and space. He doesn't get that in the Premier League. I think that's a little bit harsh. I do, because it wasn't just that Granit Xhaka sort of had time and space. It was that when he did have the ball, he used it incredibly well, and he made tackles and he covered spaces. I think tactically, Granit Xhaka is a lot better than people give him credit for. I think he can be a bit slow across the ground. I think he can be guilty of taking an extra touch in certain situations where he probably shouldn't. And I guess that ties into your point, where having a little bit more time and space is obviously important. But I still think you got to use the ball well. I still think that you got to lead by example, especially when you got that captain's armband on. And I think Granit Xhaka has done that incredibly well. I think if you sat and told a Switzerland fan or an Arsenal, and it's not all Arsenal fans, but if one of Granit Xhaka's big critics, an Arsenal fan, sat down and discussed him with a Switzerland fan, I think the two would have very different opinions. And why is that? I think it's partly because the Swiss team is probably geared a little bit more around getting the best out of Xhaka, because obviously they're not able to go and spend 50, 60 million pound on a striker or a centre half. But equally, I think that Granit Xhaka feels loved and feels wanted in the Swiss setup. And you saw that when Switzerland won the penalty shootout, I think he was probably the first player, even though Jan Sommer had made the save, he was probably the first player that everybody kind of gravitated towards to celebrate with. So this is a guy with huge influence there. And I just think that there are a lot of footballers, rightly or wrongly, who can raise their level if they feel like they're loved and they're wanted and they're part of something. And Granit Xhaka is absolutely part of something when it comes to this Swiss team. He's the captain, he's the leader, he's the commander-in-chief, if you like. And I think if we are going to sell him for the 15, 16 million pound, that is rumored to be the case, I think we're going to regret that, because I don't see how. I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit more later on. But if Arsenal are indeed close to signing Albert Sambi Lokonga for around about that price, who's a great prospect, but isn't 100% ready just yet, how can how have we replaced Granit Xhaka with a better player? We've replaced him with someone who maybe has the potential to go on and be a better player, but right now, does that actually help us? Are we actually strengthening by allowing Granit Xhaka to go, and with that money bringing in a young midfielder who's only played football in the Belgian league and is vastly inexperienced? Don't know. Let's pick up a couple of other bits. There's some Nuno Tavares questions in here. He's going to be the main subject of our podcast later on, so I'm not going to dive into that just yet. So bear with me on that. We're going to talk a lot about Tavares and a lot about some of the other business that we're going to do a little bit later on. Matt says, wish fans could just accept that Xhaka had a good game. If you can admit that, it doesn't mean you want him to stay at Arsenal. Agreed. Marble Halls makes a really good question, or asks a really good question. Do you think the fact we were in for Kante, who was a better profile of central midfielder, clouds our judgment on him? I do think that added pressure, didn't it, on Granit Xhaka when he arrived at Arsenal Football Club, because everybody knew that we'd considered a move for Kante. Everybody knew that we tried for Kante. And so when you see Kante go on and succeed the way he has, and Kante is an exceptional player, and then you see Granit Xhaka kind of stuttering in his Arsenal career at times, then yeah, naturally, it's people there's always that thing of hindsight where people are going to jump on that and go, well, we should have done this. If we had signed him, we'd have won the league. If we had done this, we'd have never dropped out of the Champions League, etc., etc. There is an element of that for sure. And it's a really, really good point. And thank you for raising it. Right, we're going to leave it there because, as I say, I've got to dash off down to the studio. But remember, come and join us on the 90 Min show. We'll be live from 11 a.m. in the studio. Is it coming home? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new. We've only got 23 likes. There's over 100 of you watching on YouTube alone right now. Let's get that up to 50 at least by the time the outro plays. It really, really helps. I'll catch you all very, very soon with more content. We'll be back with our Arsenal show a little bit later on today. Until then, ciao.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.